All righty. So, Valerie, I just want to introduce you to these people. You might know some people, or some others might be a little bit less familiar. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, what does a typical week look like for you, and just things also like, who's in your family, as well as, yeah, your workspace and church.
A typical week. There is some typicality to it. Generally, I take Mondays off. So what you can see me doing on a Monday at the moment is spending lots of time resting and recovering. And I have my husband is Josh. He's an ordained Presbyterian minister. He's currently on sabbatical, but actually really he's working in our practice more and more these days. He's also currently studying in SMBC. We have our youngest daughter who is also at home. She's taking a gap year, having finished year 12. So on a Monday, she's also around. We're all in our hoodies. And my son is in his third year of university, and he is often out at uni or working. And then we have our 10-year-old cavoodle. I work mainly from home these days, leading the psychology practice in Gordon that we have. That is, a team of just under 20, I think. Not all are psychologists, but, probably lead 20 or just under 20 people. And we go to church locally. There isn't really a Presbyterian church local to us. So we go to the local Anglican church instead. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about me and what my week looks like.
Yeah, that sounds so interesting. And I'm keen to hear a bit more about, yeah, your center. That it's called the Center for Effective Living, isn't it? How long
Yeah,
ago did you start it up?
just over 10 years, I reckon.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
really good. I always hear just, yeah, such good things about the work that you do, and such like just a really amazing resource, I think, for ministry people as well. That's really, yeah, I always hear really good things. So I'd love to just ask you briefly, how did you come to know Jesus, Valerie?
Well, actually, I was born into a Christian home and had the typical going to church and going to Sunday school experience. But I would say that my grandmother probably has been a very instrumental person in my Christian journey. Because when I was about 15 or 16, I actually resigned from Christianity. And I had like literally said to Jesus, okay, I resign. None of this stuff is working for me. But that was also the time roundabout when things like Tiananmen Square happened. And sort of as a 15, 16-year-old, trying to reconcile how come bad things happen in the world and what is the real solution. And I think because of my grandmother's faithfulness of praying, I think critical things happen in my life because she prays. I went back, read the Bible, and realized that there is only one way and one solution. So I would say that at age 16, I really gave my life over to Jesus. And then, yeah, from then on, I actually thought I would be single and in full-time ministry. That's another story.
Yeah, wow. But God had other plans, obviously.
Yes, yes, he did.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, I mean, how encouraging that is to hear, just of yeah, just the powerful example of your grandma. That's, again, just delightful to think about. Yeah, the way that works in our lives. That's so exciting. So what does a perfect day off look like for you? If you do get a day off, what do you love doing?
Oh my goodness. It's changed over the years. In this sort of transition period of womanhood that I'm going through, my day off is actually intentionally now to physically rest. I used to be a lot more active, but I have all kinds of issues with my joints and things these days. So I'm also much more invested in being mindful. So, I've committed a bread recipe to memory, for example. There are just certain things that I do on my day off that just keep me anchored in some really tangible things. And I do a lot more listening to audiobooks now. I find it really hard to read. So it's funny, like I used to be able to rattle off a bunch of things that I do on my day off. But recently, I've actually had to accept a new normal and be a lot more.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that though, I think, isn't there? Just that sense of, what it is to be and not just do. But humbling, I think, isn't it, to, that process, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, because I have to do a lot more emotional regulation of myself as well. I have so many more emotional ups and downs at the moment than I've ever had before. So the term is perimenopause, people, if you're wondering what's going on with me. It's a thing and
It
it's
is a
real.
thing. It's a thing. It really is a thing. Absolutely. And just final question that hopefully kind of just leads us a little bit into what you're going to be talking to us tonight. How did you become interested in the topic that we're going to look at tonight of ministry families and the parenting challenges that arise for them?
God basically ambushed me and just kind of made me obsessive in my attention. I have this I think when we returned to back to Australia, we were in Singapore for a few years, and I just fell back into psychology in private practice. The first private practice that I joined, and I didn't know this at the time, was actually a Christian practice, which I didn't really think much about. And well, it wasn't the first, sorry, the second one. And that's when I started to encounter these ministry families, and they had very similar patterns. And at the time, this is a long, long time ago, they were also walking in already medicated from the doctor for various things with diagnoses. And because I'd started to see some patterns, I started to wonder whether, is this what it's meant to be? We serve Jesus, go hard, and then crash. Like, is that meant to be the cycle? Surely not. And so that's when I started to try to, oh, thank you. You got my message. um, that's when I started to really be interested in it. And I think I've become just more and more interested because now that we have a whole psychology practice, you really see patterns and trends and kind of go, well, all right, if a lot of these experiences are similar, then a lot of the things that we can help must also be quite, similar. Yeah, so I think it just has now become what seems to be a lifelong quest of just one step after the next. What more can we discover? Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, there's such a lot there. And anyway, well, thank you for the thinking that you've been doing and that you are doing, because I think it's such, I mean, myself, I'm a parent, I work in ministry. I'm sure most everyone who's here tonight has some connection to either of those or both of those things. And both of them are very hard. Let me just quickly pray for Valerie and for us as we start, then I'm going to hand over to Valerie. Father God, thank you that you are our loving Heavenly Father. And Lord, we do come before you as people who are frail and weak. And Lord, we know that it is really hard to be a parent and it is really hard to be in ministry. Thank you that you are our gracious God who extends your grace and love to us. Thank you for Valerie's realness. Thanks for the many years of life and faith that she's bringing to us tonight. Thanks for her professional background as well as her personal experiences in ministry and being your child. Pray that you'd be with Valerie as she speaks to us. Help her to say what it is that you want for her to say. And Lord, give us ears to listen, that we might be encouraged to continue on in serving you and in loving the families that you've given us. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Over
Thank you
to
so
you.
much. Thanks. So it's become a bit habitual now that I just let you all know that when I do these sorts of talks, particularly if they're recorded, I have to remain very much in my role as a psychologist. I don't know whether you know this about Australian laws. But we are becoming a more litigious society, and psychologists are governed under some legal requirements. And in this world where everything is recorded and things go out, I have had some of my colleagues been brought up to the Psychology Board of Australia. So I therefore tend not to integrate a lot of biblical thinking or my own Christian thinking into my talk. I pretty much act as a psychologist, but I'm usually very happy to share lived experience, like my experiences and my opinion. And sometimes that worries people that, is she really a Christian? Why isn't she integrating stuff? And that's because I haven't finished yet. My job isn't done yet. Like I can't be taken out as a psychologist just yet. So I've got a few more years to go before that can happen. And that is largely the reason why I do it this way. Okay. So actually, one other reason for why I remember that I wanted to share this with you. I am having a particularly bad brain fog day today. So I will try to be coherent, but you might just be getting the sort of diluted version of me tonight. But it was the 2016 when I did my first presentation on ministry resiliency. And after I did that, a young adult, sort of probably, well, I would say young adult, sort of sort of late 20s, came and pulled me aside. And he said, don't forget the kids, has said, those of us who've been in ministry and who are adults now, not all of us thrived. We went through some hard stuff. And he says, as you do this, just don't forget the kids. So actually, a driving force of why I do what I do is to ensure that the next generation of ministry workers, hopefully our kids, have a hope that being in ministry as a family is a good place to be in. It's not always an easy place to be in, but that it is a good place to be in so that they have confidence that they can do it as well. And I have to say, if you ask me what is my driving reason, it's obviously for a world who knows Jesus and that will endure, because it will be up to our kids and their kids and their kids to take up the challenge to keep going. So that is really a driving force for me. And so, talking about this topic is really special to me. So I call this from Fishbowl to Coral Reef, thriving as parents in ministry. I must have had a particularly colorful day that day when I came up with this. But it is currently the way that I view ministry resiliency, that it really isn't just about the individual, it's a whole environment and a whole system. And when I first started, or when Josh, first said that he was going to go to Bible college, it might have been him or someone gave me this book with the fish in the bowl and the cat looking in. Can't remember what it's called, but that was my first introduction to what it was going to be like. And it was horrific. It wasn't the most inspiring book. I was like, this is it. I'm going to be stuck in a fishbowl and there's going to be the cat constantly looking at me and my kids. But I've since revised my thinking. Actually, what an amazing thing it is to be in ministry, because we have the opportunity to showcase what God's great design for community and family and friendship and love is. And, much like when you look at a beautiful aquarium, it's so attractive. People want to stop and watch for a while. It's restorative. And so my current thinking has been that, ministry as a whole, ministry as a family, ministry in community is an opportunity to actually, for ourselves to be healthy and attractive so that the world stops for a while, takes a look in, and perhaps desires to be a part of that. So I wonder what your experience has been in ministry. Have you felt much more like, the fish with the cat looking at them? Or is it kind of been more like, no, this is a vibrant place, we're thriving, or somewhere in between? Much of how I'm going to structure today is going to be, I'm going to be hitting you with a lot of concepts, but there are going to be times when I'll get you to just pause and just say, what is the one thing that hits you? The one question you might have, or the one thing you might have, the one insight that you gained. So here's one moment for you to just pause. You don't have to do anything other than just reflect for a moment if you were really honest, what has your experience been like thus far? So the picture of thriving in ministry starts with us as individuals, right? Before God. If we read the Genesis account of how we've been created and how the world has been created, and we understand then comes the fall. But there is a design for us to actually be thriving, to be enjoying God in the environment that he has put us in, which means that each one of us has to work on being fish that are healthy. And one of the main things that we know, like if every family is comprised of individuals, and two of those individuals are parents, and if those parents happen to be ministry workers, what research tells us time and time again for the last 30 years is that we can withstand a lot when our own spiritual resources are full. And what does that mean? It means maintaining a kind of spiritual vitality. Now, in the years when we had COVID, that might have looked like only one verse of a psalm a day. That might have been all we might have managed to do. If you're in my season of life, I can only do audio Bible at the moment, over and over again. Like it just doesn't stick. So, maintaining spiritual vitality is about finding our way back before the Lord, to be able to connect with him in whatever capacity that we have right now, but it's to be growing our own relationship. There's plenty of research now that tells us that it means that we've got to make space to reflect, to pull back, to ask questions of how am I doing? How am I feeling before God? Is there guilt? Is there shame? Is there anger? Is there bitterness at the moment? To pull back and ask those questions of ourselves and to seek renewal. Plenty of people find things like having a prayer partner as being refreshing, or an older person in ministry that we can go to with our reflections and say, I'm actually really identified. I'm actually feeling really bitter right now. Spiritual resources means about keeping a tab on our own personal growth, right? What are we pursuing, or what are we studying? What are we developing for ourselves when it comes to knowing Jesus? Or do you have that? Do you feel like you have that? Do you feel like you have the time, the resources, the space to do that? Do you have people that you can go to on a particularly hard day to pray with, who aren't going to tell you what you're supposed to do or make you feel guilty or feel worse, but who can really journey with you? And do you yourself have someone who is shepherding you? Do you have someone who cares for you deeply spiritually and catches up with you perhaps monthly, who's reading the Bible with you, for you, as in it's for your growth? So when we're parents and when we're in ministry, we want to make sure that we're not just giving and ensuring that the kids have got that around them, but that we're keeping an eye on that for ourselves, because the research will tell us that this is the biggest indicator of resiliency in ministry. It also tells us that when parents are burnt out, they very often don't have the kind of energy and enthusiasm to think about things for their kids emotionally, let alone spiritually. So that's the number one tip. Spiritual resources is the one thing you definitely want to keep your eye on. So I'm just going to pause there for a minute. If you're with someone, if you're with your spouse, you can have a conversation. But, if you were to think about your own spiritual life, and it doesn't have to be massive. You don't have to be doing Greek or reading Revelations right now. But, for you, if you were to reflect and think, how am I doing? What's going really, really well in that area right now? What's one thing I could possibly do that will make that better for you? What would that look like? I'll go back to the previous slide. I can't give you too much reflection time or we'll never leave. But that's all you want to do. Just sit with whatever velcros into your mind and your heart and just write it down. You can reflect on it much more later. So spiritual resources. Now you probably got the link to my ministry wellbeing quiz. There are 6 R's that no matter what I read in research or any Christian resource or scientific literature about burnout, these 6 things will appear. And I have to tell you, most of the time, the women tend to do worse on these quizzes because I've had this running for a while. And whenever I see the scores, it's always generally tends to be the ladies who are struggling in all R's. So if you did get that link and you did complete it, don't feel guilty, don't feel bad, don't feel like you failed the well-being test. Women generally tend to not do as well, and largely because we're multiply caring for others, right? Okay, so I've spoken about reflect. It's that time and space where you ponder and you think upon, what are some things that you're grateful for? What are some things that you're celebrating? What are some things that you're patting your back? You can pat yourself on the back and encourage yourself with. To take some time out. A lot of women find it fantastic to do this when there are no kids. Early in the morning, make a cup of tea. A lot of the dads find that they might actually do this on in their ministry space. Cultivate some time when they're in the office and they're actually taking some time, or vice versa, if you're the worker and you're the mum. But whatever it is, we've got to make time to reflect and to process our experiences, because this is one of the number one things that I found in my research that leads to burnout. It's when we don't make space to actually process and make sense of what we've experienced. Replenish has got to do with taking care of the body, the eating, the sleeping, and the moving. And again, because in ministry, we take on so much emotional and intangible stress, the body just holds it like a filing cabinet of stress. And so if we're not sleeping deeply and well, if we're not eating and we're not moving our body, the body just doesn't have a way of replenishing all of the healthy chemicals and hormones that it needs to release stress and anxiety chemicals or hormones out, right? So being able to make sure that you're doing those things well, that you're stopping, you're not always just eating the crumbs, the chocolate, or the cheese, or the coffee. They all started with C. My brain is doing very well thus far. That we are being intentional to take care of the vessel from which we serve. Yeah, it includes the brain. It's not just your body. Our brain is probably at the moment the most taxed of our body in this modern age. It's constantly switched on. So food, exercise, sleep helps with good brain care as well. Restore has got to do with coming back to your spiritual resources. I've already spoken about that. Coming back to the season of ministry, the season of parenting, what God has placed before you in your heart to understand why or where He has placed you. So at this point in time, the Lings are in a season of redefining our next mission, if you like, or our next ministry story. We're kind of in the stage of having our kids figure out what they're going to do if we're going to go somewhere. So what is that season? Reconnect has got to do with keeping a tab on the important relationships that encourage us, not necessarily the relationships that we're giving from. Not all of us will come from families that naturally give this to us. We may come from really challenging family of origin stories. So it's where can you go for a little bit of laughter and a little bit of love? a little bit of support, right? Obviously, your marriages are going to be very, very important in this, but so are your friendships. And so are family, the ones that genuinely give you that level of connection. Resources got to do with the expectations that we have of ourselves as we're serving our family, as we're serving our ministries. Perfectionism tends to be run really high in ministry workers, as is a desire to sacrifice and give of ourselves without actually really attending to our own resourcing needs, right? We just push, we just go, we just do. Some of us can do that on with broken bones even, and we don't even stop to wonder why it hurts. We're just thinking, well, that's just normal. We should just keep going. Now, rest, different. I put that as different from sleep. Rest has got to do with patterns of recovery. So how do you wind down after a long day? Are you checking your emails? Are you squeezing in the last round of dishes that you can wash? Oh, the laundry. Maybe, oh, I've got to get to that. It's 9 o'clock. And now you're putting a load on. So how are you actually giving your body and your mind the daily rest that it needs? And the weekend, for us, the weekends are going to be really, really hectic. How are we giving ourselves a moment to actually clock off from the ministry and doing side of things and really just coming back to a resting point? So rest has got to do with having really great renewal and recovery practices through the day, through the week, and through the year. And again, if you had one thing, if you've done the quiz, and there was just one area that you thought, oh, do you know, I'm really missing this. Like the last time I actually had a good laugh with Bob or Nancy, it did me a world of good. I'm really missing that. I think that could be one thing that I think about pursuing this year. What's your one thing in those 6 R's that you think, you know what? That might be a great thing to put back into my well-being circle. So last year, I did some research to find out what was happening in the life of clergy, in particular, Australian clergy. You can catch my results and my podcast here. But essentially, what my research discovered was that, there were a lot of people that are doing okay, but there were also a lot of people who weren't doing okay. And the main reasons that clergy weren't doing well was extreme conflict in the church, like at really toxic levels. Not all churches, but for those who were burnt out and those who were struggling, there was a lot of conflict happening in the church. And the top 3 reasons clergy would have thought for leaving the ministry were loneliness, worrying about the impact on their family, and then came workload. So if we look at loneliness and worrying about the impact of family, you can see that for clergy, there is a great deal of relational grief, loss, and worry that comes from serving in ministry. The podcast was published last year. There are about, I think, 18 to 20 episodes if you want to catch that. But what we've discovered is that, yes, we've got to do a bunch of things to ensure that conflict in church, gets a good looking at, and we can reduce those levels of stress. But in ministry, that loneliness as parents, what's really important for us is to have a good look at how our marriage is doing. Our friendship, a lot of times in the practice, once we've had people come through, we've become co-workers, housemates, personal assistants, PowerPoint editors and sermon critiques, criticizers. And the friendship and the intimacy and the joy of being one and the belonging has really, really suffered, right? The chemical of belonging is oxytocin. Right. Oxytocin is something that is currently being studied a lot in even just contemporary literature for businesses and organizations. It's the chemical of belonging. Oxytocin is produced when you have sex. It's produced when you're in the heady heights of falling in love. It's produced when you see your baby and you smell that baby smell. The oxytocin runs into your system. Now, we're not going to be able to sustain that all the time. Oxytocin is produced the more that we connect, the more we touch, the more we gaze at one another, the more we have affection in our relationships. And so as parents, the marriage and our friendship is really important. When we do assessments of ministry resiliency, or when we have people come back from the mission field, one of the key things we assess is the quality of the marriage, because without that strong togetherness as human beings, not as co-workers, many other things suffer as a result. So we do want to ask ourselves the question is, how's our friendship going? How updated are we with one another in terms of our love maps? Do we still know the hobbies and the interests? Are we fully aware about some of the issues that are hard for our spouse? Are they missing family? Are they struggling with their sense of worth? Are they feeling excessively guilty because they're constantly feeling like they're letting God, the church, and you down? So thriving, the healthy ecosystem also means that the two fishies have to also be looking after their relationship and their friendship together before we think of serving as a team. After we produced the Australian Clergy Wellbeing Down Under survey, the podcast, this year we have launched our Australian Ministry Kids Wellbeing Survey. I'd love for you to take a photo of this and give this survey to your kids if you can. We've particularly been looking at kids from year 3 to year 12. They could be living in Australia or overseas, but essentially they're Australian citizens. And we launched that late April, I think, and we just hit our 100 clean surveys. Like we had about 130, but I think kids kind of drop off as they finish this, as they did the survey. But we were really hoping to get at least 100 complete so that we could do the stats that we wanted. And you get to be the first lot that I can give you some preliminary findings. Okay. What have the kids said about being a ministry kid? So please do send your kids through if they're of the right age group to complete this, because we're still open for data. Number one is the kids are sold on Jesus. We know that in the practice because we see that as well. Ministry kids that come into the practice love Jesus, sold on Jesus, really proud, I think, to be part of the Jesus crusade, if you like. They don't necessarily see being in ministry as being a bad thing. Many of them speak about the perks, like school discounts, really kind people giving them holidays, or allowing them to use their houses or whatever. They're actually genuinely know that there are perks of being in ministry. They appreciate that there is flexibility as well. They know that they live a pretty unique life. But they all were saying, all 100 of them, or 130 if we got there, were saying the same thing, regardless of whether they were on mission or in parish ministry. They all said that they wish they would like to have more time with their parents. Oh, sorry about that apostrophe. Children want more time with their parents. And I think particularly because in our ministry settings, dads are usually the ones in the full-time ministry. The number of times dad turns up more time with dad, more time with dad. And I don't want you to feel guilty about this. I just want you to know that most ministry kids surveys are post, as in we ask adult ministry kids, right? So when they're adults reflecting back. This is the first survey I know of the kind that is asking children in the moment right now, because it gives us an opportunity to actually go, okay, rather than waiting till they're 25 to tell us, this is what they're actually saying. And it's not the kind of parent time that requires a lot of time. They basically want to hang out with you. They're basically saying that they just want to kick a ball or, just watch movies together. They just want to hang out. Because the other thing that children were saying is very similar to what the clergy survey was saying, is that they are on the outside most of the time. Some kids were telling us about things like, when they go to school, they get made fun of because of what their dad does, or that it's too hard to explain what dad does. And kids were telling us that there is no place that they can go to actually really talk about their experience other than at home, because what they do is really weird. The children also told us that they really need, as a result, I think, they need a place where they can talk about hard emotions, when they feel angry, when they're scared, when they're worried. They really want to be able to share these things with parents without feeling like they're going to get corrected and taught the right way to feel. Now, this is certainly what we were seeing in the practice, or we are seeing in the practice. Lots of ministry kids, we've noticed that they're quite emotionally dysregulated because they don't have a way to talk about what they're feeling. It just gets shut in within them. There was one ministry kid that struck me. They said that at the point where at the ordination service, when they were all called in the front and, there's the laying on of hands, they heard from the ordination service that dad would lose their job if they ever misbehaved, and that it was a promise that had to be made there and then for them to always be good. What? Nobody said that to you? But this is some of the material that's coming through the survey, that there is this sense that dad could really get in trouble. And yet it's so hard. So where do I go to talk about this stuff? My friends find me weird. None of my friends can relate with what I'm going through. How do I even explain to my best friend? Right? So there's only home to come back to. Kids were also telling us that they were very busy and responsible. So I go to more weddings and funerals than the average kid in my school. They encounter death, right? They're very often the ones who are babysitting as well. And there's a responsibility that they feel and a sense of uncertainty and loneliness with that as well. That it's not relatable with their friends, right? And things like even the things that they can connect with their friends, like playing sport on Sunday or listening to the latest, song that's not allowed at home. They don't even have that to connect with their friends. And so happily, or sadly, I actually think it's happily, the solution seems to be that clergy are saying that they're lonely and they're worried about their family. And the kids are saying, we want more time with you guys. Happily, that seems to be a sweet spot, right? And so we will be publishing our results, but it's fairly typical things that most kids say about what they're looking for their parents. They're really not looking for deep and meaningfuls or for you to unpack Taylor Swift lyrics with them or anything like that. It just really seems to be just chill, hang out, say no to some busyness, and just be able to feel like regular families every now and again. Huh? Okay. So when you kind of absorb that information, What's the one thing that stands out for you in your family or in the picture that you see at home? What does it start to prompt you with? I wonder. Well, from what we gather from the survey and what we know as psychologists in our own practice, ministry families where the individuals are okay, where the parents and the marriage is, generally going okay, and the relationship with the parents are present. Kids don't need you to drop everything and spend 45 minutes with them. But the most powerful thing we know of that research tells us is the 30-second turn away from your bench and look at them when they are saying something important. All right. Some of the kids in the survey were saying they just didn't know when dad was working and when dad wasn't, because he's always at home. But how do I know I can actually go and talk to him? How do I know? It's those sorts of things. When we are at home, it's giving clear signals to know when you're accessible and available. And make sure that if you say that that's when you're accessible and available, you are accessible and available. These are the things that they remember, right? If we are taking them to the park or the playground, keep your phone at home. Plenty of eye contact, plenty of gazing, plenty of looking. You don't even have to say anything, but you are a silent witness to their life and possibly one of the only few people that gets it. So we want to be present with them. If they're coming home and they're looking a little bit glum, especially if they're teenagers, you don't want to probe. That's not one of the P's. Try not to probe. But you can be around and be kind. Offer a hot chocolate. Offer to just, help out with the chores for that day because you're looking a little bit down. Yeah. So it's to be present, it's to attend to who is walking through the door and giving them full attention when it's really important that they need it. They need us to be playful. Four Weddings and a Funeral was a whole movie, but it seems to be the life of ministry kids. The number of times they've mentioned that in the survey. Always very serious. There's a lot of serious things that they have to deal with, right? It really sounds very, very heavy in the world of being a ministry kid. They need a little bit of playfulness because, they're not going to be able to do it really in your ministry setting. If you've ever picked up the book, Barnabas Piper, I think it's called The Pastor's Kid, you will see in what happens to our kids when we don't even know. Things that are said in the supermarket, things that are said in the church toilet, things that are said in the car park, things that are said when they wear something. Everything is very serious. Like, they're not going to afford to be playful in church. And so this is the space for us to take it down a notch or 10 notches and to find some time at home to be light and playful and silly and ridiculous and even contentious. Why not? Where else are they going to have this space to just be normal? They need us to be patient. I think many of the kids were telling us that they know that they're not perfect. They know that they've got a long road ahead of them. Many of them worry about moves, leaving friends, changing schools. So they need us to be regular parents who have the long view and the long game with them. Remember, teenage brains go into dinosaur mode. You lose the brain for a season because that's just how brains develop. They're not going to be able to give you solid, mature, emotionally regulated answers when they're 7. So they need us to be parents who are patient. One of the key things we see walking in the practice are kids who are taught to have Christian character and godliness, and their behavior is judged accordingly. But they're still kids. They disagree, they get angry, they get frustrated. And so they need us to see them as being regular kids with the long road ahead. And I think the number one thing that we got from the survey is that they really need us as partners in ministry. They're sold on Jesus. Nobody asked them to be a part of the gig. They're part of it. In God's sovereignty, He works that out for sure. But they need us to be partners with them. They want to partner with us, not just be busy, but they want to be a part of our world, and they want for us to be a part of their world as well. I'll never forget that. I don't know, maybe you're the ministry family that is listening to this, but I do remember this one time where a minister said to me that they would bribe their kids with a family holiday if they filled up the roster during Easter and during Christmas. Right? Like if we all just, they fill up the roster, they would get their family holiday. Well, that's not really partnership, guys. That's something else. Right? So we do want to remember that for the kids, they're trying their hardest to be a part of the gig. And they don't have Bible college under their belt. They don't have formative mentoring under their belt. They haven't yet been discipled, really. But they've got us. So, what are these different types of responses that we can have? We really want to have attuned and good enough parenting, just good enough. Right, dismissive parenting is the type of parenting that neglects the emotional needs of our kids and is really about consequences, punishment, taking away of privileges, really rigid rules, and there's no conversation or understanding of the child's context. So, for example, during COVID, we had to remind parents, not just ministry parents, but all parents, that you can't be too strict with screen time. This is the only way the kids are going to actually be able to connect. We have to understand what the need is, and we have to be able to flex so that they can meet those needs. We need to understand it. So, dismissive parenting just kind of says, this is my view, my perspective, and this is what needs to happen. Attuned parenting is about inquiring and having a curiosity about the child's world, but obviously still having standards, right? Still knowing that there is a need for us to have appropriate behavior, but tries to understand when the behavior is not, is not in line, right? It's responsive, it checks in, and it explores. It's an explorer. If you guys look at each other, if you're married, and kind of go, I've known this person for 25 years and they still surprise me. That's the kind of love and curiosity that we want to share our kids, right? Because they're still developing. So attuned parenting is interested. A lot of time ministry families present in the practice because they worry that the kids are, going down the wrong path. They're showing signs of poor Christian judgment. Can you fix our kids? Now, that's just giving our kids or passing on the mantle of perfectionism, right? We've got to deal with our own issues of what is good enough, right? I used to say when we were in Singapore, because my kids were born in Australia and were the most un-Singaporean kids that ever lived. It was not our finest time. I learned a lot. But whenever we went up to church, I'd say to the kids, don't worry, they're looking at me, not at you. I'm pretty weird here too. So, if anybody's going to get laughed at or, asked why I don't even know how to use chopsticks, it's going to be me. Okay? They're not looking at you. Good enough parenting kind of just absorbs that attitude of going, look, I'm a work in progress. I'm doing the best that I can. Good enough is good enough. versus trying to hold it all together, being perfect. And the aim of the game is to meet those core emotional needs without striving for perfection. All children need to feel that they belong. No matter how weird they are, how difficult the season is, that they belong. All children need to have the freedom to express valid needs and emotions appropriately. Right? So it's okay to say you don't like chicken. It's also okay to say, would you mind having some chicken because I took a lot of effort to make it. But it's okay to say that you don't like the chicken. It's okay to cry because you didn't get to go to someone's birthday party because you had to go to church. But if it's a value of the family that you go to church, we do go to church. But of course it's horrible. You might even slip in. I wish I was somewhere else today as well. We need to have the freedom to express how we're feeling. All children have the need to feel competent and that they've got some autonomy and that they're growing in your trust. That when you look at them and when they see you looking back at them, they see that you are more and more trusting them. Once when I asked for feedback, my kids were about, I think, 3 and 6. I asked my family, I said, like my family of origin, so, how's it going with our kids coming over to your house? They said, oh my gosh, they're such messy eaters. They need to learn to eat more neatly. But you know what? They were learning to use cutlery and they were learning to feed themselves, and it was messy, but that's what kids need. They need the encouragement to say, yeah, you really got that, haven't you? Even though it's not perfect. So they need a sense of privacy. This came out in the survey as well. They need to have some privacy. And, men's church houses are not really big. And sometimes this is a situation that they can't share with their friends. The average family tends to say, well, once we have teenagers, we'll need a 4-bedroom house and a huge this and a garage that they can hang out with, that sort of a thing. But then comes our ministry kids who are still sharing their bedroom with their 7-year-old sibling and their, 15-year-old sibling. So some sense of privacy that we see them as individuals. They need spontaneity and play. I've talked about that. But they also need realistic limits and self-control, because the aim of the game is to produce human beings who can manage themselves and who don't hurt others. So I've got a couple of things that I'd love to share with you. Number one is based on those principles of attuned parenting and emotional needs. I think this is, in my opinion, ministry kids and families need to be able to believe this in one another. We're in this together. Right? We're in this together. Here's an example of one of the number one things that comes up for ministry kids, the fear that they're going to have to move. I see you're looking through your photos. Are you feeling worried about the move? Yeah, Dad, I'm scared. What if I don't make any new friends? Yeah, I feel that way too. It's really tough to leave friends behind. It's normal to feel worried. When we moved here, I felt the same way. Really? I didn't know that. Yeah, you're not alone in this. Ministry kids need to hear this from us. We're in this together. I feel this too. We're in this together. Oxytocin, belonging, the little fishies together, swimming, not always worrying that the sharks are going to come and get them. Number 2, and we'll do this together. I was thinking that I might want to have some time to say goodbye to some of my friends. Is that something you're thinking of? Dad, I don't know if that will be way too sad. Feeling sad is hard, isn't it? What would it be like to move away and say, and you don't get to say goodbye? Would you feel sadder? Maybe, but I don't know what to do. Hey, do you want to come up with some ideas together? We'll do this together. Who else are they going to talk about this when they go to school? And no matter what, ministry kids need to hear the unconditional positive regard, because whether we know it or not, they're usually living under expectations, whether it's real or not. They've got, if you have a congregation of 300 people, they do get that there are 300 people. A lot of ministry kids worry that the ministry worker will lose their job if they don't behave, or if things don't go right for them at school. So it's the no matter what. That no matter what, I love you. No matter how angry we feel right now, I want to understand you. Even when things are really difficult, we will get through it together. Things are really busy at church, but I will always come back to you. You are not responsible for your siblings, even if it feels like you are. That's my job. That's not your job. So it's that sort of no matter what statements that we can make for our kids or to our kids. That was a whole chunk of information there. I wonder what is the one thing that really resonated for you from that section. So we've talked about taking care of ourselves as individuals, taking care of ourselves as a marriage, friendship, and then really responding as parents to the need, the mutual need ministry families have, which is one another. I miss you. I'm worried about you. Respond to that by having attuned parenting, moments of connecting, the no matter what statements. And now we'll look at, well, then how do we do this family thing as parents? I really love this book. Has anybody read this? Parenting Gospel Principles That Can Radically Change Your Family. I really love this because it's a values-driven parenting book. It kind of gives you 14 broad values, things that are really, really important, things like generosity or respect or honor, and kind of unpacks that from what does that look like as a family to live those values out. I really like this approach to doing ministry as a family and thriving in ministry, because it helps us to identify what are the things for us as a family that's important. When people rally together and it's like Queensland versus New South Wales. The one time we went to Queensland and we were from New South Wales, it was intimidating. Like you just did not feel safe as you walked around telling people you were from Sydney. But, that's kind of like the huddle, the family in ministry. It's really, we're together, guys. We're a team, right? We've got this. So family needs to feel safe. It needs to be a place where we're not flying off the handle because we're so stressed. And could the kids just lay the table and just do it right so that I could get on with the dinner and get on to Bible study? Our family needs to feel like a real safe place where we have some values. So what are those values? A few years ago, the kids were really, really little. We wrote out our family charter. The things that were really important to us as a family, and made sure that we understood that as we connect to one another, that it was safe, that it was honoring, that it was respectful. Family need to have shared experience, because memories are really important for us to develop together, right? When you sit back, and sometimes when the season is really hard, you can laugh at some of the funny times you've had together, some of the experiences that you've had with one another, whether it's out in the garden, whether it's playing with the new puppy, whether it was going to a new holiday destination. So we want to have shared experiences. We want to have the shared experience on a regular basis in the week as well. What is the one joining activity that you have as a family that never gets compromised no matter what happens, and that our kids will watch us say, I'm sorry, I can't come tonight for that meeting because we're doing this. The number of times that kids mention that as being a real sense of solidarity. Yeah, my parents, they really got my back because they said no. What is that? Is it Friday dinners? Is it every school holiday you eat popcorn in your pajamas for breakfast? It's these shared experiences. I've talked about shared values. What are the things that we think are important as a family, and we want to do it together because then the kids feel like they're contributing as well. If some of your values have got to do with generosity, for example, and you're like, hey guys, what will it be this year? What would we like to give, some of our money or our clothes or whatever, doing it together. And we want to also have a space where we talk about our hopes and dreams that's not just ministry. Right? Remember I said to you that the ministry kids, they're sold on Jesus. All right. They love the Lord. Maybe some of them are struggling, but by and large, they can tell us in the survey. But beyond ministry, what's out there? What else is there? What hopes and dreams are there? What else is there? And I'm not talking about achievements, but, do you, for example, really want to play that piece from Led Zeppelin, for example, and they see you going for it on your day off? How inspiring. Look at that. Or maybe they see you really struggling with, doing a piece of language learning or something. Beyond ministry, what are you into? Right? Because then that gives them permission to have their own hopes and dreams as well. And to be able to think beyond going to church, weddings, and funerals. So it comes down to the rituals, the celebrations, and the special moments we create as family, the patterns, the things that connect us, that help us to know that we're go the Blues or go the Reds, go the Lings. We're in it together. Popcorn, pajamas, first Monday of school holidays. Right? Or what is that for you guys? Pizza Fridays. What's that? When do we get to celebrate and to have special moments together? What might that look like for your family? I'm conscious of the time now. So I want to come to this last part of my talk, which is to actually really just say that I cannot teach parenting now, but I've got some suggestions for books. And I want us to remember that when children express an emotion, there's usually levels to that emotion because that's what we're like as well. If you think they're acting out and they're angry, they might be scared right down the bottom. Every emotion, for us even, there is usually some other layers underneath. And I don't have time to show you the video, but here are some books that I really recommend. If you're really looking to connect with your children deeply and to have the bandwidth to tolerate all the emotions that they have. So in that video was basically showing that sometimes the reason why we can't tolerate our children's emotions is because we haven't learned to tolerate our own. We haven't learned to understand our own emotions. And so we're very quick to split that off and discipline the behavior. But this book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, when my son was in year 7, I actually gave him the book and I said, highlight the bits I need to work on. It's probably one of the most terrifying but most powerful things. I don't know where I got the idea, but I might have been so desperate. I said, okay, you highlight the bits that I need to work on. And these would be some books that I would recommend to really get into that habit of really talking to our kids at that level that they can express how they're feeling. Because remember, the parent-child connection has got withdrawals and deposits. And when we're busy, we certainly do make a lot of withdrawals from them. We make lots of requests. We give them consequences. We correct them. We're impatient and we ignore them, in a busy ministry household. But in order to be able to have the ability to make those withdrawals reasonably, they've got to have a surplus of deposits to keep the parent-child connection going. We need to show them interest, affection, praise, have lots of patterns of connection and shared experiences with them. In my experience, families that come through the practice have over withdrawn the bank account in the parent-child connection, largely because we're busy, we're frustrated, we're desperate for the kids to just cooperate, or genuinely, we're just worried for them. We're just worried for them, and we want to try to correct them. But we do have to make a surplus of those deposits as well. I'm pretty sure. My final slide, and then we go to questions. Here's what I really would love for you to remember. You are the right parent for your kid because God gave them to you. That makes you the right parent for the kid. And you are going to be the best parent for the kid, no matter what, because you love them. No one else in this world loves them smelly, dirty, gross, is interested in their inputs and their outputs. You are the best parent because you love them. And so we just need to head for small things, just the small things. They don't have to be big things, just little things done frequently. Embrace the seasons. There are going to be some times when it's rougher and tougher with we may be going through things. Perimenopause at the moment means that I'm not the easiest parent to live with. People scatter at this point in time. Know that it's seasonal and embrace it. But make sure that you're filling up your tank as well as you go along. All of those care and well-being practices so that you're ensuring that you feel loved and you feel taken care of. And I guess don't forget that, footprints in the sand, that God is not our kids' grandfather. He's not our grandfather. He is our father. And he directly is interested, invested, and walking with each one of us. So that's pretty much all I had to say for today.
Wow, thank you so much. I was madly writing loads of notes. And I was like, oh, quick, I've got to pay attention and kind of come back and speak. So I was just madly writing all these notes. Such a lot there. I was loving how you were just giving us such solid and practical and just fascinating research. And then you also just gave us those moments to pause and reflect and to ask that question of something that we resonate with, something we can think about. So I was loving that. I loved it. There was so much in there with those little moments to just stop and reflect.